I am back with another update on Bryan Kohberger with the assistance of, what is this? I think it's law of crime. Yep, law of crime. So let's take a look at this. Good morning, good afternoon, or good night for wherever you're tuning in from. Let's go, guys. Oh, hold on.
Mountain part is shielded by a mountain. There's a lot of other big, dense apartment buildings there. Your phone is going to behave differently inside of that residence than it might on the road behind the residence.
Bryan Kohberger, the accused quadruple killer. He may not be going on trial just yet, but that doesn't mean there haven't been some interesting updates as of late. That's what we're going to get into. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law and Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. Hey everybody, this is a law and crime legal alert. Google Incognito tracked users' browsing data without their knowledge. Well, Mass Tort Alliance, one of our legal sponsors, is actually helping users file for compensation due to Google users' privacy issues surrounding Google Incognito. So if you've used Google Incognito anytime since 2016, you can start your claim in less than 10 questions at incognitoclaims.com/sidebar. With a lot of the other stories that we've been covering here on Sidebar, we haven't had a chance to talk about Bryan Kohberger in a minute. And there have been some very interesting developments in this case that we want to talk about. So that's what we're going to get into, the top 5 updates over the past several weeks or so in the Bryan Kohberger case to get you caught up to speed. So what are we talking about? We're talking about the former Washington State University grad student who was arrested and charged for a horrific quadruple murder that occurred on the night of November 13th, 2022. This is when 4 University of Idaho students were brutally stabbed to death in an off-campus rental home in Moscow.
Recordings just got better.
Yeah, pardon me, guys.
I'm so excited to announce
Idaho.
I know they have.
Xana Kernodle was arrested 6 weeks after the killings. Police tied him to the murders through cell phone data, surveillance footage, and of course, DNA. Prosecutors saying the DNA on a knife sheath left behind at the crime scene is a statistical match to Bryan Kohberger. We're going to get into that a little bit more. But now let's talk about some developments as of late.
So, you guys, the knife sheath has been, I guess, the prosecution's smoking gun, simply because there is DNA evidence matching Bryan Kohberger. And he was also alleged to have been driving a similar vehicle that was seen in the area during or around the time of these unalivings. So it's really looking as if the prosecution has more than just a circumstantial case. Circumstantial is where they have like minimal or no evidence, and they have to actually prove their point with what they would call what? They would just mount a case based on their theories as far as what they believe happened. But in this case, they don't have to do that because they actually are indicating that they have evidence. One of the biggest things that Bryan Kohberger has on his side, guys, is his defense attorney. She is the best public defender in the state of Idaho. And believe me, she's arguing every single point humanly possible in this case. And she's doing a fantastic job.
I'm going to start with a recent update. So the defense has been arguing that the prosecution hasn't provided them what they need for trial. They claim that the prosecution hasn't turned over to them all of this evidence like video footage and cell phone records. And we know that during the normal course of trial, there is discovery. In fact, in Idaho, the Rule 16A says that the prosecuting attorney must disclose to the defendant or defendant's counsel any material or information in the prosecuting attorney's possession or control, or the latter comes into the prosecuting attorney's possession or control that tends to negate the guilt of the accused. 16B adds to that by saying if the defendant makes a written request, the prosecutor has.
Are you serious about growing on
Oh
Instagram
my
or what?
goodness.
I see you watching my YouTube content, and so I know that you're interested in growing on Instagram, but you haven't
to turn over other evidence.
Hold on, y'all.
Reports, tests, documents, recordings, witnesses. There was a hearing. And during this hearing, Ann Taylor, counsel for Bryan Kohberger, tried to explain to the court how much of a problem this is.
I'll tell you the other thing that's really troubling and frustrating, aside from the other files that we received in preparation for motion to compel, is these screenshots that we got for the first time last week when we're on a motion to compel and have a witness before the court. We didn't have those screenshots that Detective Mallory created before. The only thing we had was Exhibit 48 that was given to the grand jury, which is a video that was handed over then. So this is really problematic.
And at one point, to criticize the prosecution's discovery efforts, she said, quote, "Discovery is being given to us like we're living in a snow globe." Now, in fact, the defense, they called a couple of witnesses to illustrate that point as well. And I want to highlight one in particular, Cy Ray. This is a name you're going to want to remember. He's a very important defense witness that the defense plans to call regarding cell phone evidence. I'm going to get to him more in a little bit, but just listen to what Mr. Ray had to say about the evidence that the defense does not have access to.
I would expect significant drug testing around any location that coverage maps were being used in the CAS report. I would expect significant documentation on potential routes that this device may have taken. I would expect significant documentation on the crime scene.
And he went on to say, quote, "It is a terrible practice to justify probable cause with these very detailed call detail records that give breadcrumb-like trails for individuals and then not map it." And he also went on to say that what he has seen so far has been exculpatory for the defense, meaning tending to show Kohberger is not guilty. Quote, "Because of the piecemealing of the data, because of the missing data, because of the data I'm reviewing that is incredibly inaccurate, everything that is missing is absolutely in benefit of the defense right now. There are other reports that are missing that I can't tell you are benefiting of Mr. Kohberger or the state." And there was this back and forth between the prosecution and the defense on all of this. And the prosecution, to highlight their point that they're doing the best they can, they even talked about how much they have turned over already.
To date, we've given 15,691 bait-stamped pages of discovery. So for a little context, this is a 2-inch binder. It would be about 39 of these. We've given 13,758 bait-stamped photographs. That's about 34 of those binders of photographs.
That's a lot of discovery.
We've given 911 AV dumps. Those
Guys, as far as the discovery goes, a lot of this stuff is sealed and not open to the public. The prosecution as well as the defense is trying to keep, I guess, a lot of the evidentiary information out of the public eye because they don't want this case tried in the court of public opinion. They want it tried in a court in the state of Idaho.
digital files, in addition to a massive hard drive, about 50 terabytes full of discovery. And that includes audio, video, from about 285 interviews, 15,000 video clips from approximately 79 businesses, 8,000 video clips from approximately 10 residences, 417 files containing call detail records, multiple terabytes of records for 11 computer devices, 17 cell phones, multiple social media accounts, and 4 tower dumps.
Wow. And by the way, I cut that off. There's more that they described that was turned over, but clearly no wonder that this trial is taking forever and this whole pre-trial process is taking a long time. Think about how much they got to go through. Also, by the way, big theme for the prosecution is we turned over a lot. And look, the FBI and the U.S. Attorney's Office, they haven't turned over to us what the defense is looking for. There's only so much we can do. We can't give over what we don't have. So as the judge sorts all that out, this now leads me to take a step back and talk to you about another major update in this case, the alibi. So for a long time, I would argue since Kohberger's arrest, we had wondered what would be his alibi. Where was he really during these killings, right? Now, we heard rumblings about what it might be, but it was more fully articulated back in April when Kohberger's defense team, they were given a deadline to submit an alibi defense. That's a requirement under Idaho law, and they filed just in time. So, what's the alibi? Well, in their filing, it reads, quote, Mr. Kohberger moved to Pullman, Washington in June of 2022. As an avid runner and hiker, he explored many areas of the Palouse. Of note, he explored Wawawe Park in July of 2022, and this became a favorite location. After the school year began, Mr. Kohberger was busy with classes and work at Washington State University, and his running and hiking decreased but did not stop. Instead, his nighttime drives increased. This is supported by data from Mr. Kohberger's phone, showing him in the countryside late at night and or in the early morning on several occasions. The phone data includes numerous photographs taken on several different late evenings and early mornings, including in November, depicting the night sky.
So what they're trying to say is that he was just casually driving around the night of these unalivings. They're saying that his alibi is basically he's stargazing. That's his alibi.
Kohberger was out driving in the early morning hours of 2, as he often did, to hike and run and or see the moon and stars. He drove throughout the area south of Pullman, Washington, west of Moscow, Idaho, including Wawawe Park. Mr. Kohberger intends to offer testimony of Cy Ray, CSLI expert, cell tower, cell phone, and other radio frequency curricula vitale is attached to show that Bryan Kohberger's mobile device was south of Pullman, Washington, and west of Moscow, Idaho on November 13th, 2022.
Hold on, y'all. Commercial.
Highway in the early morning hours of November 13th, and this could not be the vehicle captured on video along the Moscow-Pullman Highway near Floyd's cannabis shop. Now, let me just quickly put into context why this is important. So in the probable cause affidavit from law enforcement, it states that on the night of the murders at 2:42 a.m., they say Kohberger's phone is connecting to a tower that covers his apartment in Pullman, Washington. 5 minutes later, the data shows that he leaves the residence and travels south through Pullman, Washington. This is consistent with the movement of the white Hyundai Elantra that was caught on surveillance tapes, the car they say he was driving. Then the phone stops responding to the network, and prosecutors say he shut off the phone purposely to avoid detection. Doesn't come back on the network until 4:48 a.m., 2 hours later, after when prosecutors say the killings happened, and then it hits the towers covering the area to a highway south of Moscow, Idaho. And then between 4:50 a.m. and 5:25 a.m., the phone hits a tower showing the phone is traveling towards Uniontown, Idaho, back to Pullman, Washington, 5:30 a.m., it hits the area providing coverage for his residence, and that is consistent with the phone being back at his residence, consistent with the movement of the Hyundai Elantra. When we cover stories like this about people who are either accused or convicted of committing crimes against people out of nowhere, people that you least expect, you got to ask yourself, how well do you know the people in your life? Do you know all you should really know? Well, that's why I want to talk to you about our incredible sponsor who may be able to help you out here. This is Truthfinder. So Truthfinder is a service that can provide actual safety for you guys. And I say that because Truthfinder is one
I
of the
don't
largest
subscribe to
public
that.
records
I don't
search
know that
services
that's
in the
something you
United
should
States.
do.
Their whole goal is to help people like
I think that people should tell you the truth. You shouldn't be intruding in your significant other life. That's out there. And if you have to do this, you shouldn't be dealing with that person. I'm just saying.
So, while the defense is suggesting that the prosecution's theory of travel is off, I got to tell you, I'm not sure at this point if they're going to either agree or disagree that Bryan Kohberger's phone was not connecting to the network during that key point in time. Are they saying when the phone was connecting, we believe it was in a different location than the prosecution is alleging? Okay. But what about when the killings were happening, right? That time period when prosecutors say that the phone was off. Are you saying we can really show where the phone was, that it wasn't turned off? Not just before or after the phone isn't connected to the network, but during that critical time of the murders, we'll tell you where the phone was? A little hard to say. At this point, what we do know is that Cy Ray, who we heard from earlier, big witness for the defense, 20-year law enforcement veteran, worked over 1,000 death investigations, expert witness, testified in over 100 cases, including regarding cell phone analysis. So we're going to see. It seems also, I think.
Guys, I think my phone is ahead of the video quite a bit. So I'm going to give it a minute for it to catch up. You guys know I can't play the audio from my computer because it will be all scratchy. So
The alibi is.
yeah, I need a new computer. If anybody wants to donate to that fund. This is the detective that he just spoke of. Police
Also trying
officer,
to explain what he did before, or allegedly did before November 13th, 2022. Maybe they're trying to say, he was out and about, he was doing nothing bad, nothing nefarious, because remember, during the probable cause affidavit, it was revealed that Kohberger's phone GPS pinged at or near that house on King Road, the crime scene, at least 12 times before November 13th. Police say every one of those pings, except for one, happened late at night or in the early morning. And by the way, the cell phone data is consistent with the movement of the Hyundai Elantra. But it's interesting because prosecutors came out and said, we aren't arguing that he was stalking the victims beforehand. So it'll be interesting how all this is argued at an ultimate trial. I will tell you that the car was spotted on several cameras passing the King Road home 4 times between 3:29 a.m. and 4:04 a.m. on the night of the killings, and then speeding away 16 minutes later. That's what the prosecutors are alleging. Then prosecutors say that car, they have it on tape, leaving the Washington State University campus at 2:44 a.m. They capture it heading towards Moscow.
Whoa, what happened? Guys, hold on. I don't know what's going on with my computer. It just went completely black. I do apologize, everyone. My computer just went completely dark, so I wanted to make sure you guys could still hear me. And y'all see, okay, the screen is back. Okay. I'm like, why? So, okay, good. It's working. But So, as you guys can clearly see and hear, his defense attorney is just, she's bomb. She's really good.
25 a.m., the camera shows returning back to Washington State University. And by the way, later on in the afternoon, they tracked the phone.
Hold on, guys.
Store, and they see Kohberger exit the white Hyundai Elantra. So they're matching him to the car.
Congratulations. You've been approved for the new U.S. citizen aid.
Hold on, guys.
Your allowance will be sent to you within.
And not only that, after the killings, a Washington State University officer spotted a white Hyundai Elantra in the parking lot of an apartment complex near campus. The car came back, registered to Bryan Kohberger. So Kohberger and his father, they drove that 2015 white Hyundai Elantra from Washington to Pennsylvania in the weeks before his arrest. Kohberger, as you might recall, pulled over by law enforcement twice on that trip for speeding and tailgating. Now let's talk about an update on DNA. So as I mentioned, this is a crucial piece of evidence in this case. Authorities took the DNA from the button snap of the knife sheath that was left at the crime scene, and they used genetic genealogy. They used a private lab to create a genetic genealogical profile. The FBI ran it through genetic genealogy websites, building a family tree, and eventually they compared it to DNA from trash that was recovered from Bryan Kohberger's family home. They concluded that there was a high probability that the DNA from the knife sheath is from the biological father. And so when they arrested Bryan Kohberger, eventually they do a cheek swap of him, and they found the DNA on the sheath is a statistical match to Bryan Kohberger. Prosecutors said in their quote, the STR profile is at least 5.37 octillion times more likely to be seen if the defendant, is the source, than if an unrelated individual randomly selected from the general population is the source. Meaning the profile that scientists developed is more likely to be Bryan Kohberger than someone random. Now, defense attorneys have been fighting back. More specifically, law enforcement's use, or IGG, investigative genetic genealogy. They have been saying that this has improperly led law enforcement to Bryan Kohberger. And the defense wants to understand exactly how Bryan Kohberger was targeted. The hope is that they could say this was all improperly used to target him, to name him as a suspect. Their argument would be that this is unconstitutional, that it violates the Fourth Amendment against search and seizures without probable cause. Prosecutors have said that IGG was not used to obtain any warrants in this case, that this was a tool that was used, but it was not the end-all be-all to arrest Bryan Kohberger. This was more based on good old-fashioned police work. But this is where it's interesting. So reporting indicates that the defense has two witnesses that they...
So this is the case, for those of you who are just getting in here, from Idaho, Moscow, Idaho. This is why you should not share your DNA, in addition to it being used for genetic warfare. Oh, yeah, I mean, so did he just... Well, you know what, Libby? They're saying, the prosecution is saying that this was not as random as they thought, because he would frequent a restaurant that two of the women worked. And early on in the beginning of the case, they were saying that there's a internet connection as far as either Instagram or Facebook, where he followed one of the victims. They believe that there may have been an attraction to that victim. But I definitely want to see the prosecution put this case together. This one is going to be one that I I would like to be there in person for sure. If I can't make it for some unknown reason, which I'm not even going to speak that into existence, I will be able to make it. I have to be in there, gavel to gavel, watching this trial unfold, because his defense, she is the best public defender in the state of Idaho. In the entire state, she's the best. I gotta watch this live and in person. It's totally different from watching it online versus being in the courtroom. There you could feel the energy. You could, you see the beads of sweat, and also you get to see the jury. Now, a lot of juries may have poker faces, but some jurors don't.
Had wanted to testify in a pretrial hearing, and it seems possibly they want them to testify in an upcoming trial. Leah Larkin and Bicca Barlow. So our researching indicates that Leah Larkin, PhD, is a genealogist who has criticized IgG in the past. In a filing from last year, she talked about genetic genealogy, how it's been wrong in the past, how law enforcement improperly utilized these services, especially when she claims that certain sites like 23andMe prohibit IgG. She said,
You see how that was? Now that
Hold on, guys. Commercial.
take out Joe Henry smart debit cards and spend or save the money that they just earned.
as genetic genealogy is not perfect in one of her filings, she's quoted as saying, any given centimorgan amount can represent more than one possible relationship. Bicca Barlow is an attorney and forensic consultant who specializes in forensics, DNA, criminal cases, including STR-based DNA testing, mitochondrial DNA testing, and YSTR-based testing. So as of a recent hearing, there has been a battle of having defense experts, presumably Barlow and Larkin, review IgG materials and unseal certain portions of this. And earlier this year, the judge did order the prosecution to turn over some of these IgG materials to the defense. Makes sense because they want to attack this, arguably, again, one of the strongest, most direct pieces of evidence against Bryan Kohberger. So that will be an ongoing battle. Now I want to focus on another update in the case, the victims' families. So as you can imagine, as all of this legal maneuvering is going on, this can't be easy for the families. In a recent statement from the Gonsalves family, it reads, quote, this case is turning into a hamster wheel of motions, hearings, and delayed decisions. Can we all just agree that this case needs to move forward and the judge needs to start setting hard deadlines in this case? It goes on, not every motion needs a hearing. Not every decision needs to take a month to decide. Discovery, discovery, discovery. You have what we want. No, I don't. Yes, you do. No, I don't. Let's have a new hearing. Hit repeat. This banter has been going on for 17 months. Then once you get a hearing, you have a hearing about the decision that was made at that hearing before the last hearing, and there needs to be another hearing. I know our statement sounds as if we are incredibly frustrated, and we are. We understand the justice system, and we want a fair trial for the defendant, but turning the case into a delay game serves no one's interest other than the defense. Once again, thank you all for your kindness and prayers for our family. Now, that is completely understandable, especially since there's a possibility this trial may not happen till spring or summer 2025, almost 3 years after the killings. His family deserves finale.
You understand why the family is so frustrated now, because this trial is not even being discussed for a trial until spring or summer of 2025. And that's pushing it based on all of the motions and issues that they're still working through. So it would be indeed pushing 3 years since the unalivings that any sentiment of justice, depending on the verdict, comes forth in this case for the families of the college students that were brutally unalived in their off-campus home.
I get it. It's completely understandable. Now, as they mentioned, and I'll highlight this from a legal point of view, it is important that a defendant's rights are protected and that they are given every opportunity to present a defense, because for the families who believe Kohberger is the killer, the last thing they would want is for him to be convicted and then
That's an absolute. The defendant's rights have to be protected.
conviction overturned on appeal because some mistake was made during the pretrial process. That would prolong this. That would prolong the pain. Also, what must be incredibly frustrating for the family, and I'll tell you, the public and the media too, was the decision to close hearings in this case. That's another update. Because listen to this back and forth between the defense, the prosecution, and then Judge John Judge on all of this.
Both contemplate balancing this public right to an open hearing versus the interests such as privacy, safety, and the right to a public trial or to a fair trial. In deciding whether or not to file the motion to close the hearing, the state weighed those interests. And ultimately, it came down that the need to protect the privacy and the sensitive information and ultimately protect the state and defendant's right to a fair trial outweighs the right to an open hearing.
For the court to allow the prosecutor to say, we need to keep this all private for a fair trial, really ignores the public nature of this case. It really ignores the fact that Bryan has been essentially convicted in the media. You don't have to read but a few articles to see how negative they are about him. He has a right to have this information withheld, brought out in public, so that people can see it's not this neat little package. So people can start to wonder if Bryan's innocent. Your Honor, Bryan is innocent. And he has an absolute Sixth Amendment right to have his hearings in public.
All right. Well, I kind of mentioned this a moment ago. I just feel like we need to get into the details, okay, of all these issues before I open it up. So I'm going to close that hearing. Now, that doesn't mean that after we sort out all of those issues and I have more understanding of why you aren't getting what you want or what you asked for, or whether or not there is something that you've asked for that doesn't exist, or that some of the materials are holding with the FBI, and that we need to get that. I mean, those are all really complicated processes, and I would feel much more comfortable when, again, I'm trying to protect a fair public trial and not have a maybe not intentional, unfair
Where's my
that goes out to the public. I think that's the balance for me. And I want to see what all the issues are, arguments from both sides, so that I can make a more informed decision.
So yes, hearings have been closed in this case. There is a gag order in place that makes understanding what is really going on a bit difficult.
I'm not sure, but my icon isn't there, y'all. I'm not feeling that at all. I just noticed that.
Judge is going to have to try to streamline discovery in this case to keep things ongoing. And then, of course, there's the idea of when this trial will actually happen and where it is going to be held. Our final update, June 27th.
Yes, exactly.
The judge is seemingly going to decide whether to move this trial to a different venue. Prosecution says the trial should happen here, should be heard by this community. Defense has argued that Bryan Kohberger cannot get a fair trial here. They have been supporting that with phone surveys of potential jurors, which, by the way, created its own headache. The prosecution said that these surveys were problematic because potential jurors were being asked very specific things about the case. Kohberger's arrest, the car, the DNA, the knife sheath. And they were saying that this is potentially tainting a jury pool, that this is prejudicing them. The judge said, look, these surveys can continue as long as the questions stick with things that are in the public record, which a lot of this already is. You just can't violate his gag order. So, those are some recent updates. We are going to do our best to continue following what happens next, including where this trial is going to happen. That's all we have for you here on Sidebar. Everybody, thank you so much for joining us. As always, please subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Jesse Weber. Speak to you next time.
Okay. So that's it. That's all. Those are the biggest updates on the Bryan Kohberger case. If there are any additional updates, I will present them to you guys as well. If you guys are not already subscribed to the channel, please go ahead and subscribe. Set your notifications to all so that you are notified when I go live or add new content. If you're catching this on the replay gang, you know I rocks with the replay gang. Replay gang, go ahead and drop me some comments. Smash that like button and share. Bush babies, I don't know why y'all still in the bushes. Come on over to the channel and subscribe today. All right, guys, until next time.